The doctor's words fell like stones in the quiet office. 4 months. Maybe 6 if we're lucky. Richard Coleman sat across from Dr. Bennett, staring at the wall behind him, unable to focus on the man's sympathetic face. The room seemed to shrink around him as the reality sank in. 4 months. After building an empire worth billions, conquering markets across 3 continents, and owning homes he rarely visited, Richard Coleman had run out of the one thing money couldn't buy: time. Are you absolutely certain? Richard asked, his voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside him. At 53, he had expected at least another 20 years to figure out what to do with his fortune. He had no wife, no children, no one to leave his legacy to. His life had been a relentless pursuit of more deals, more money, more power. The cancer has spread aggressively. We can try more treatments, but honestly they would only make your final months more uncomfortable, Dr. Bennett explained, sliding a folder across his desk. These are your options for palliative care. I suggest you get your affairs in order. Richard nodded, taking the folder without opening it. Get his affairs in order. Such a clinical way of saying prepare to die. Outside the medical building, Richard's driver waited with the car door open. He slid into the back seat of the luxury sedan, instructing the driver to just drive, no destination in mind. As the city passed by his window, Richard wondered if anyone would truly mourn his passing. He had colleagues, business partners, people who respected him, feared him even. But friends? Family? Those had been sacrificed long ago on the altar of ambition. His phone rang, his assistant, no doubt wondering why he wasn't at the board meeting scheduled for this afternoon. Richard silenced it. For the first time in decades, a board meeting seemed utterly meaningless. The car slowed as they approached a red light in one of the city's less affluent neighborhoods. Richard barely noticed until something caught his eye: 3 young girls sitting on the steps of a dilapidated community center. They weren't playing or laughing like children should. Instead, they sat close together. The oldest one, probably around 10, had her arms protectively around the younger 2. Their clothes were clean but worn, and there was something in their posture that spoke of wisdom beyond their years. As if sensing his gaze, the oldest girl looked up, making direct eye contact with Richard through the car window. There was no fear in her eyes, no awe at the expensive car. Just a quiet dignity and determination that struck Richard to his core. Stop the car, he said suddenly. His driver glanced back, confused. Sir? Stop the car. Now. The driver pulled over and Richard stepped out, standing awkwardly on the sidewalk. He rarely ventured into neighborhoods like this, where his tailored suit and expensive watch made him stand out like a sore thumb. The 3 girls watched him cautiously as he approached. Up close, Richard could see that they were definitely sisters. They shared the same deep brown eyes and similar features. Hello, Richard said, suddenly unsure what had compelled him to stop. Are you waiting for someone? The oldest girl straightened her shoulders. Our social worker. She's inside talking about our case. Your case? Richard asked. They're trying to find us a new foster home. Again. Her voice held no self-pity, just a matter-of-fact acceptance that troubled Richard deeply. The youngest girl, who couldn't be more than 5, peered up at him. Are you rich? You look rich. Richard found himself smiling, the first genuine smile since leaving the doctor's office. Yes, I suppose I am. The middle sister, around 7 or 8, nudged the youngest. Tiana. You can't just ask people that. It's all right, Richard said. I don't mind honest questions. The door to the community center opened, and a harried-looking woman stepped out, surprise registering on her face at the sight of Richard talking to the girls. Mr. Coleman? She clearly recognized him from news coverage or magazine profiles. Can I help you with something? Richard turned to face her, a strange calmness settling over him. 4 months to live. No legacy. No one to remember him as anything but a wealthy businessman who died alone. Actually, he heard himself saying, I think I might be able to help you. The oldest girl was watching him intently, her eyes narrowed slightly as if trying to figure out his angle. Richard met her gaze and saw something of himself in her wariness, her protectiveness of her sisters. These young ladies need a home, correct? Richard asked the social worker. Yes, but I'd like to provide one. The social worker's mouth fell open. The 3 girls exchanged confused glances. And Richard Coleman, billionaire with 4 months to live, felt the first stirring of something he hadn't felt in a very long time: purpose. As the sun began to set over the city skyline, Richard knew his life was about to change completely. He just didn't know yet how these 3 girls would transform not just his remaining days, but his entire legacy. People laughed when they heard the news. Not to his face, of course. No one laughed directly at Richard Coleman, but he heard the whispers, saw the skeptical glances, received the concerned calls from his board members and business associates. A publicity stunt, some said. Midlife crisis, others suggested, unaware of his diagnosis. He's lost his mind, was the general consensus among the business elite who had known him for decades. Richard let them talk. For the first time in his life, he didn't care what anyone thought. The adoption process was normally lengthy and complex, but Richard's wealth and connections accelerated things. The social worker, Ms. Daniels, had been skeptical at first but became an unexpected ally when she saw his sincerity. Mr. Coleman, these girls have been through a lot, she had explained during their second meeting. Their mother died of an overdose 2 years ago. Father unknown. They've been in 3 different foster homes since then. The system keeps trying to separate them, but Zara, that's the oldest, refuses to be apart from her sisters. Richard nodded, making notes. Zara, Layla, and Tiana. He repeated their names, committing them to memory. They need stability more than anything. I have to ask, why are you doing this? These girls aren't babies. They come with history, with trauma. This won't be easy. Richard considered telling her about his diagnosis but decided against it. That would certainly halt the adoption process. Instead, he offered a partial truth. I've realized that all my success means nothing if I don't use it to make a difference. These girls deserve a chance at a better life. I can give them that. Ms. Daniels studied him carefully. And what happens when you get bored of playing father? These aren't accessories or projects, Mr. Coleman. I know that, Richard said quietly. I give you my word, they will want for nothing, including love and attention, for as long as I'm able to provide it. That phrase, for as long as I'm able, echoed in his mind as he stood in the empty bedroom of his penthouse apartment, surveying the space. The room was massive, designed for guests who rarely came. Now it would become a bedroom for 3 sisters who had never had rooms of their own. We'll need to redecorate, he told his assistant, Jenny, who stood beside him looking slightly shell-shocked. Jenny had been with him for 8 years and had never seen him make such an impulsive decision. Of course, sir. What did you have in mind? Richard frowned. I have no idea. What do girls their age like? He genuinely didn't know. His own childhood had been sparse and functional, with parents who valued achievement over comfort or joy. Jenny smiled, seeming to warm to the task. I can coordinate with an interior designer. Maybe we should ask the girls what colors they prefer. Yes, good idea. And we'll need to hire someone? A nanny? No, that's not right. They need more than that. A governess? Jenny suggested. Richard shook his head. That sounds like something from a Victorian novel. We need someone who understands what they've been through. Someone who can help them, and me, adjust to this new arrangement. Jenny made a note. I'll start looking for qualified candidates with experience in foster care and adoption transitions. As the day of the girls' arrival approached, Richard's penthouse transformed. The once sterile space now contained colorful bedrooms, a playroom filled with toys and books, and a kitchen stocked with foods that children might actually want to eat. Richard had insisted on being involved in every decision, much to the surprise of his staff. The night before the girls were set to move in, Richard sat alone on his balcony overlooking the city. The pain in his side, the first symptom that had sent him to the doctor, was worse tonight. He'd refused the strongest painkillers, wanting to keep his mind clear for tomorrow. His phone rang, his oncologist calling to remind him of his appointment next week. I'll need to reschedule, Richard told him. I'm in the middle of something important. Mr. Coleman, delaying treatment isn't advisable in your condition. I understand the risks, Richard said firmly. But right now there's something more urgent than my treatment plan. After hanging up, Richard stayed on the balcony until the early hours of the morning, thinking about the strange turn his life had taken. He had exactly 14 days left in his 4th month of his predicted 4-month timeline. 2 weeks into his adoption journey, and already his priorities had shifted completely. For the first time since his diagnosis, Richard wasn't thinking about dying. He was thinking about living, however little time he had left, in a way that actually mattered. The following morning, Richard stood in his living room, uncharacteristically nervous as he waited for Ms. Daniels to arrive with the girls. He'd bought new clothes for the occasion, not his usual tailored suit, but casual slacks and a sweater that Jenny assured him made him look more approachable. The elevator pinged and Richard took a deep breath. As the doors slid open, 3 solemn faces looked back at him. The girls stood close together, each holding a small backpack that presumably contained everything they owned. Welcome, Richard said, his voice unexpectedly hoarse. Welcome home. Zara, the oldest at 10, stepped forward first, her sisters slightly behind her. Thank you for having us, Mr. Coleman. So formal, so careful. Richard's heart ached for what these children must have endured to become so guarded. Please call me Richard, he said, then hesitated. Or whatever makes you comfortable. Tiana, the 5-year-old, peered around the apartment with wide eyes. Your house is inside the sky, she whispered in awe. Richard couldn't help but smile. Yes, I suppose it is. Would you like to see your rooms? You each have your own, but they connect so you can always be close to each other. As he showed them through the apartment, Richard watched their reactions carefully. Layla, the middle sister, touched everything lightly, as if afraid she might break something or be scolded. Zara kept a watchful eye on her sisters while taking in every detail of their new surroundings. And little Tiana, after her initial amazement, stayed close to Zara, occasionally hiding behind her when overwhelmed. Miss Daniels pulled Richard aside as the girls explored their new bedrooms. Remember, this is a huge adjustment for them. Don't expect too much too soon. Richard nodded. I understand. We'll take it one day at a time. As Miss Daniels prepared to leave, she handed Richard a card. This is the number for their therapist. They have sessions twice a week. It's important they continue. Of course, Richard agreed. Whatever they need. After Miss Daniels left, Richard stood in the hallway, listening to the quiet murmurs coming from Zara's room where all 3 girls had gathered. He'd imagined this moment differently, perhaps with more excitement, more joy. Instead, there was this careful, cautious beginning, 4 strangers trying to figure out how to become a family. Richard glanced at his watch. Day 1 of this new life. Whatever time he had left, 4 months or less, he was determined to make it count for these girls. They deserved nothing less. The first dinner together was awkwardly quiet. Richard had arranged for a chef to prepare child-friendly foods, mac and cheese, chicken tenders, and vegetables with dip, but the girls ate little, watching him with wary eyes. Is the food okay? Richard asked, trying to break the silence. Zara nodded politely. Yes, thank you. You don't have to finish if you don't like it, Richard assured them, noticing how Layla was pushing her food around her plate. We don't waste food, Zara said firmly, giving her sister a pointed look. Richard felt a pang as he realized the implication. These children had probably known hunger, had been taught that leaving food was not an option. In this house, he said gently, there will always be plenty of food. You never have to eat something you don't enjoy. Tiana looked at him with wide eyes. Really? Even if it's vegetables? Richard smiled. Even vegetables. Although I hope you'll try them sometimes. That small exchange seemed to release some tension. Tiana abandoned her broccoli without guilt, and Layla finally spoke up. Can we have dessert? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Of course, Richard said, relieved to hear her speak. There's ice cream in the freezer. Several flavors, actually. I wasn't sure what you liked. After dinner, Richard showed them how to use the television in the living room, set up with child-appropriate streaming services. As the girls settled on the couch to watch a movie, Richard retreated to his office to give them space, leaving the door open so they could find him if needed. He had just taken a painkiller when there was a small knock at his door. Zara stood there looking serious. Can I talk to you? She asked. Of course, Richard said, gesturing to a chair. What's on your mind? Zara sat, her back straight, hands folded in her lap like a little adult. I want to know the rules. Rules? Richard echoed. Yes. What are we supposed to do? What aren't we supposed to do? When do we get in trouble? She asked these questions matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather rather than potential punishment. Richard felt a surge of anger at whoever had made this child so concerned about getting in trouble. Well, he said carefully, I expect you to be kind to each other and to tell me if you need anything. I expect you to try your best at school when you start next week. But mostly, I want you to feel safe and happy here. Zara looked skeptical. That's it? There must be more rules than that. Richard thought for a moment. How about this? We'll figure out the rules together as we go. This is new for all of us. Zara seemed to consider this. What if we do something wrong? Then we'll talk about it, Richard said firmly. I will never hurt you, Zara. I will never hurt your sisters. No matter what happens, we talk things through. That's my promise to you. Zara nodded slowly, though Richard could tell she wasn't entirely convinced. Trust would take time. Can I ask you something else? She said. Anything. Why did you pick us? There are lots of kids who need homes. Richard hadn't expected this question so soon. He thought about how to answer without mentioning his diagnosis. "I saw something special in you and your sisters that day outside the community center," he said honestly. "The way you look after Layla and Tiana. Your strength. I thought you deserved a chance at a different life, and I realized I could give you that." "Because you're rich," Zara stated, not asked. "Being able to provide for you financially is part of it," Richard acknowledged. "But money alone doesn't make a home. I'm hoping we can build something more meaningful than that." Zara studied him with those serious eyes that seemed too old for her young face. "Mr. Coleman?" "Richard," he corrected gently. "Richard," she tried the name cautiously. "My sisters are everything to me. I need to know you won't separate us." "I would never do that," Richard said firmly. "You three belong together. I promise you'll always stay together." Something in his tone must have convinced her because she nodded, some of the tension leaving her small shoulders. "The movie's starting," she said, standing up. "Do you want to watch with us?" Richard felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with his medication. "I'd like that very much." That night, after the girls had gone to bed, all three choosing to sleep in Zara's room despite having their own, Richard sat in his living room, scrolling through his phone. His email inbox was full of business matters that suddenly seemed insignificant. Instead, he found himself researching schools in the area, activities for children their age, and resources for adoptive parents. A sudden sharp pain made him wince and reach for his medication. As the pain subsided, Richard faced the reality of his situation. He needed to make arrangements for the girl's future, a future without him. The adoption was legal and binding, but these children needed more than just his money after he was gone. They needed someone who would love them, understand them, continue the work of helping them heal. Richard opened a new document on his laptop and began to type. He had connections, resources. There must be a way to ensure these girls wouldn't end up back in the system when he died. He worked through the night, making plans, writing letters, setting up trusts. By morning he had the outline of a solution. When dawn broke, Richard made his way to the kitchen to start breakfast, surprised to find Zara already there, carefully making toast. "Good morning," he said. "You're up early." "I always wake up first," she explained, buttering the toast with careful precision. "Tiana likes her toast cut into 4 pieces and Layla doesn't like the crusts." Richard watched her, this small girl who knew her sister's preferences so well, who had taken on the role of caretaker far too young. "How about I help?" he offered. "I make pretty good scrambled eggs." Zara hesitated, then nodded, making space for him at the counter. As they worked side by side preparing breakfast, Richard felt a strange sense of peace despite the pain in his side, despite the ticking clock. However this story ended, he knew he had made the right decision. By the end of the first week, a routine was beginning to form. Richard had hired Mrs. Reynolds, a kind but no-nonsense woman with experience working with foster children, to help with the day-to-day care of the girls while he managed his increasingly complicated schedule of medical appointments and business obligations. The girls had started at their new school, a progressive private institution that promised small class sizes and individualized attention. Richard had been upfront with the administration about the girls' background, ensuring they would receive any additional support they needed. On Friday afternoon, Richard received a call from the school principal asking him to come in for a meeting. Worried, he rearranged his schedule and arrived at the school to find Zara sitting outside the principal's office, arms crossed, eyes downcast. "What happened?" Richard asked, sitting beside her. Zara shrugged, not meeting his eyes. "I got in a fight." Before Richard could respond, the principal, Dr. Moore, opened her door. "Mr. Coleman, thank you for coming so quickly. Please come in." "Zara, would you wait here a moment?" Inside the office, Dr. Moore explained the situation. Zara punched another student at recess. Apparently, the boy made some unkind comments about her and her sisters being adopted. Richard felt a surge of protectiveness. "What kind of comments?" "He suggested that you only adopted them for publicity or as some sort of charitable tax write-off," Dr. Moore said grimly. "Children can be cruel, especially when repeating things they've heard at home." Richard's jaw tightened. He'd been so focused on helping the girls adjust that he hadn't considered how others might perceive the situation or what rumors might be circulating. "I understand why Zara was upset, but violence isn't the answer," Dr. Moore continued. "The other child's parents want her suspended." "And what punishment is the boy facing for his hurtful comments?" Richard asked coolly. Dr. Moore looked uncomfortable. "We're addressing that separately. The boy's father is on our board of trustees and—" "I see," Richard interrupted. "Well, I'm on no one's board, but I am Zara's father now. And while I don't condone violence, I won't have her punished for defending herself and her sisters against cruel gossip." He stood, his tone leaving no room for argument. "If Zara is suspended, all 3 girls will be withdrawn from this school immediately, along with the rather substantial donation I was planning to make to your science department." Dr. Moore paled slightly. "Perhaps we can find a compromise. A warning for Zara, and some mediation between the students." "That sounds reasonable," Richard agreed. "And I trust you'll be speaking to this trustee about the example he's setting for his son." Outside the office, Zara looked up as Richard emerged. "Am I in trouble?" she asked, her voice small but defiant. "No," Richard said, sitting beside her again. "But we need to talk about better ways to handle situations like this." Back at the penthouse, after Layla and Tiana were occupied with Mrs. Reynolds, Richard sat with Zara in his office. "Dr. Moore told me what the boy said," he began. Zara's eyes flashed. "He said you only took us in because you felt sorry for us. He said you'd send us back when you got tired of playing hero." Richard sighed. "People will always talk, Zara. They'll make assumptions about things they don't understand." "But it's not true," she exclaimed, showing more emotion than Richard had seen from her yet. "Is it?" "No, it's not true," Richard assured her. "I adopted you and your sisters because I wanted to, because I believed we could be a family. I will never send you back." Zara studied him, searching for sincerity. "Promise?" "I promise," Richard said, meaning it with every fiber of his being, even as he felt the weight of what he wasn't telling her. Time was already running out, and he hadn't figured out how to explain his illness to the girls. "Next time someone says something that upsets you, come to me or another adult," Richard continued. "Using your fist should be the very last resort." "Dad used to say that sometimes you have to fight," Zara said quietly. Richard blinked, surprised. This was the first time any of the girls had mentioned their biological father. "Your dad?" Zara nodded. "I don't remember him much. He left when I was 6, before Tiana was born. But he taught me how to make a fist." She demonstrated, tiny fingers curled inward, thumb outside. "Your dad was right that sometimes you have to stand up for yourself," Richard acknowledged. "But there are many ways to be strong." Later that evening, after the girls were in bed, Richard found himself looking up their case files again. The father wasn't mentioned much, just that he had abandoned the family when Layla was a toddler and before Tiana was born. No name, no information on his whereabouts. The mother had struggled with addiction for years before her overdose. The girls had been in the system ever since. Richard wondered what memories they carried of their early life, what scars, visible and invisible, they bore. The therapist had warned him that trauma often emerged in unexpected ways as children began to feel safe enough to process their experiences. The next day, Richard canceled his business meetings to spend time with the girls. He took them to the zoo, watched as Tiana squealed with delight at the elephants, as Layla carefully read every informational sign, as Zara finally began to relax and act like the 10-year-old she was. At lunch, sitting at a picnic table with chicken fingers and fries spread before them, Tiana asked innocently, "Are you our dad now?" Richard nearly choked on his drink. "Well, legally I'm your adoptive father. But you can call me whatever makes you comfortable." "Can I call you Daddy?" Tiana asked, dipping a fry in ketchup. Richard felt something catch in his throat. "Yes, if you'd like to." "I'll still call you Richard," Zara stated firmly. "That's fine too," Richard assured her, understanding her need to maintain some boundaries. Layla, always the quietest, spoke up. "I had a dream about our mom last night." Richard tensed, unsure how to navigate this territory. "Do you want to talk about it?" Layla shook her head, then nodded, then shrugged, a series of conflicting signals that reflected her internal confusion. "She was singing to me. She used to do that sometimes when she was okay." "She sounds like a good mom when she was okay," Richard said gently. "She tried," Zara said, a surprising defense from the girl who had shouldered so much responsibility due to her mother's struggles. "She wasn't always sick." Richard nodded, letting them lead the conversation, sensing this was an important moment. "Do you have a mom?" Tiana asked Richard. "I did. She died a long time ago," Richard answered truthfully. "Like our mom," Tiana said solemnly. "Did she get sick too?" "Yes, she was sick," Richard said, the parallel striking him forcefully. History repeating itself. A parent lost to illness, children left behind. But this time the children wouldn't be alone. He would make sure of that. As they left the zoo, Richard holding Tiana's small hand in his, he felt another stab of pain in his side. He'd skipped his morning medication, not wanting to be drowsy for their outing. Now he regretted it as the pain intensified. "Are you okay?" Zara asked, noticing his grimace. "Just a cramp," Richard lied smoothly. "Too much walking for an old man like me." Zara rolled her eyes, a wonderfully normal preteen reaction that made Richard smile despite his discomfort. "You're not that old." No, Richard thought, "I'm not. But I won't live to be older." That night, Richard made an appointment with his lawyer for the following week. It was time to update his will, to ensure everything was in place for the girls when he was gone. 4 months had seemed like such a short time when the doctor first delivered the news. Now, looking at the 3 sleeping faces as he checked on them before going to bed himself, Richard prayed for every one of those days. He wasn't ready to leave them. Not yet. 3 weeks into their new arrangement, Richard received a call from his oncologist. "You've missed 2 appointments, Mr. Coleman," Dr. Brennan said, concern evident in his voice. "Your condition won't improve without treatment." "I understand," Richard replied, glancing at the calendar where he'd marked the girls' activities for the week. Tiana's dance class, Layla's art therapy, Zara's basketball practice. "Can we schedule something for Friday morning? The girls will be at school." "The girls?" Dr. Brennan sounded surprised. Richard realized he hadn't updated his doctor on the adoption. "Yes, my daughters. It's a recent development." There was a pause on the line. "Mr. Coleman, we need to discuss pain management and your care plan going forward. Given your prognosis—" "I'm aware of my prognosis," Richard interrupted. "But my circumstances have changed. I need to stay functional for as long as possible." "All the more reason to come in," Dr. Brennan insisted. "We need to adjust your medication and discuss hospice options for when the time comes." Hospice? The word hung in the air like a death sentence, which Richard supposed it was. "Friday morning," he repeated. "I'll be there." After hanging up, Richard sat heavily on the edge of his bed. The pain had been worse lately, harder to ignore. He'd been taking the minimum dose of pain medication, just enough to function without being too drowsy or confused to care for the girls. But he knew it wouldn't be enough for much longer. A small knock at his door pulled him from his thoughts. Layla stood there in her pajamas, clutching a book. "Hi," she said shyly. "Mrs. Reynolds said I should ask you to read my bedtime story tonight." Richard smiled, pushing aside his worries. "I'd love to. What are we reading?" "Charlotte's Web," Layla said, holding up the book. "We're at chapter 7. In Layla's room, Richard settled beside her on the bed and began to read. He was surprised when halfway through the chapter, Tiana appeared at the door, dragging her blanket behind her. "Can I listen too?" she asked. "Of course," Richard said, making room for her on the bed. By the time he finished the chapter, both girls were nestled against him, Tiana nearly asleep. As he tucked them in, Tiana had taken to sleeping in Layla's room lately, a sign of growing bonds between them. Richard marveled at how quickly they had worked their way into his heart. Leaving their room, he almost collided with Zara in the hallway. "Were you reading to them?" she asked. "Charlotte's Web," Richard confirmed. "Would you like me to read to you too?" Zara shook her head. "I can read by myself." "I know you can," Richard said. "You're very capable, Zara. But everyone likes being read to, sometimes even grown-ups." Zara seemed to consider this. "Maybe tomorrow," she conceded. "I'll look forward to it," Richard said, meaning it. "Good night, Zara." "Good night," she replied, then added hesitantly, "Richard." The next morning, Mrs. Reynolds arrived early as Richard had a business meeting he couldn't reschedule. As he prepared to leave, Tiana clung to his leg. "Don't go," she pleaded. Richard knelt down to her level. "I have to go to work, sweetie. But I'll be back in time for dinner." "Promise?" Tiana asked, her lower lip trembling. "Promise," Richard said, tapping her nose gently. Zara watched this exchange from the doorway, her expression unreadable. As Richard stood to leave, she approached him. "You won't forget, right?" she asked quietly. Richard understood the deeper question. How many adults had made promises to these girls only to break them? "I won't forget," he assured her. "I'll be home by 6. At the office, Richard found it hard to concentrate. His company, Coleman Enterprises, had operated smoothly without his direct involvement during his recent absence. His executive team was capable, and truth be told, Richard had been grooming them to take over for years, never quite able to step away from the company he'd built from nothing. Now, sitting in the boardroom as his CFO presented quarterly projections, Richard found himself thinking about Tiana's dance recital next month, wondering if he'd still be well enough to attend. Richard. His COO Marcus was looking at him expectantly. "Your thoughts on the merger proposal?" Richard blinked, forcing himself to focus. The terms aren't favorable enough. We should counter with a 15% lower valuation. The meeting continued, but Richard's mind kept drifting back to the girls. He'd been so consumed with making arrangements for their material needs after his death, the trust funds, the educational provisions, the housing, that he'd neglected the emotional component. Who would love these girls when he was gone? Who would read them bedtime stories and celebrate their achievements and comfort them when they were sad? After the meeting, Richard called his lawyer. "Jacob, I need to add something to my will. The guardian we discussed for the girls, I want to meet her in person before we finalize anything." "Of course," Jacob replied. "I'll arrange it. She's eager to meet you too, by the way. She was quite moved by your letter." Richard had spent weeks researching the perfect guardian for the girls. Catherine Diaz was a respected child psychologist who specialized in trauma and attachment. She had worked with foster children for 20 years and had adopted 2 children of her own. On paper, she was perfect. But Richard needed to be sure, needed to look her in the eye and know his girls would be safe with her. True to his word, Richard arrived home at 5:58 p.m. The girls were in the kitchen with Mrs. Reynolds, helping to prepare dinner. "You came back," Tiana exclaimed, running to hug his legs. "Of course I did," Richard said, lifting her up despite the pain it caused him. "I promised, didn't I?" Zara gave him a small nod of approval, and Richard felt like he'd passed an important test. After dinner, as the girls were getting ready for bed, Richard felt a sudden wave of dizziness. He gripped the kitchen counter, waiting for it to pass. "Are you all right, sir?" Mrs. Reynolds asked, concern in her voice. "Fine," Richard said automatically. "Just tired." Mrs. Reynolds didn't look convinced. "You're pushing yourself too hard. Those girls need you healthy." Richard almost laughed at the irony but managed to nod instead. "You're right. I'll try to rest more." But rest wasn't an option that night. Around midnight, Richard woke to a scream. He rushed to Layla's room to find her thrashing in the grip of a nightmare, Tiana watching wide-eyed from the edge of the bed. "Layla, wake up," Richard said gently, sitting on the bed and placing a hand on her shoulder. "It's just a dream. You're safe." Layla's eyes flew open, filled with terror. For a moment she didn't seem to recognize him. Then recognition dawned and she burst into tears. "It's okay," Richard murmured, hesitantly opening his arms to her. To his surprise, she launched herself into his embrace, sobbing against his chest. "You're safe. I've got you." Zara appeared in the doorway, instantly alert. "What happened?" "Just a bad dream," Richard explained, still holding Layla. Zara approached the bed, sitting on Layla's other side. "Was it the one about Mom?" she asked softly. Layla nodded against Richard's chest, her sobs quieting. Tiana crawled over and patted her sister's back. "Daddy's here now. He'll keep the bad dreams away." Richard felt a lump form in his throat at Tiana's simple faith in his ability to protect them. If only it were that easy to keep all harm at bay. "Would you like some warm milk?" he asked, remembering his own mother's remedy for sleepless nights, one of the few tender memories he had of her before illness claimed her too. Layla nodded and Richard gently extracted himself. "I'll be right back." In the kitchen, as he warmed the milk, Richard found himself gripping the counter again as pain radiated through his abdomen. It passed after a moment but left him shaken. The doctor had warned him that the pain would increase as the cancer spread. He needed to talk to the girls soon about what was happening, but he couldn't bring himself to shatter their newfound security. When he returned with the milk, he found all 3 girls huddled together in Layla's bed. He handed each of them a mug, then sat in the armchair nearby. "Do you want to talk about your dream?" he asked Layla. She shook her head, then changed her mind. "It was about the day Mom didn't wake up," she said in a small voice. "I was the one who found her." Richard closed his eyes briefly, imagining the trauma of such a discovery for a child. "I'm so sorry you went through that," he said, wishing he had better words to offer. "After that they took us away," Tiana added sleepily. "To the sad house." "The group home," Zara clarified. "Before the foster homes." Richard listened as the girls began to talk, sharing pieces of their past that they'd kept hidden until now. The sterile group home where they'd spent 3 months. The first foster family who had been kind but overwhelmed. The second who had tried to separate them. The third who had viewed them as nothing more than paychecks from the state. As they talked, Richard's resolve strengthened. These girls had already lost so much. He couldn't change his diagnosis, but he could ensure that his death wouldn't send them spiraling back into the system. They would stay together. They would be loved. He would make certain of it, even if he had to orchestrate it all from beyond the grave. When the girls finally drifted back to sleep, Richard remained in the armchair watching over them. Dawn found him still there, having not slept at all, making plans for their future. The meeting with Dr. Brennan confirmed what Richard already knew. The cancer was spreading faster than expected. His 4 months might be closer to 3. There are treatments we can try, Dr. Brennan said, reviewing Richard's latest scans. Not to cure but to buy time. What kind of time? Richard asked. And at what cost? Dr. Brennan sighed. A few more weeks, possibly a month. Side effects would be significant. Fatigue, nausea, confusion. Richard shook his head. I need quality time more than quantity. My daughters need me present, not barely conscious. Your daughters? Dr. Brennan repeated. Richard, have you told them? Not yet, Richard admitted. They've been through so much already. I'm trying to find the right moment. Dr. Brennan leaned forward, his expression sympathetic but serious. There won't be a right moment. And the longer you wait, the less time they'll have to prepare. They deserve the truth and they deserve the chance to say goodbye. Richard knew the doctor was right, but the thought of seeing fear in Tiana's eyes, of adding another loss to Zara's already heavy burden, was almost unbearable. I'll tell them, he promised. Soon. That afternoon, Richard met Catherine Diaz at a quiet cafe near his office. She was younger than he'd expected, early 40s perhaps, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that immediately put him at ease. Thank you for meeting me, Richard said after they'd ordered coffee. I know this is an unusual situation. Catherine smiled. Life rarely follows the paths we expect. Your letter was very moving, Mr. Coleman. Please call me Richard. And thank you for considering my request. It's a lot to ask of a stranger. Not entirely a stranger, Catherine pointed out. I've worked with the foster system for 20 years. I know Zara, Layla, and Tiana from their case files. Richard leaned forward. Tell me what you know. Catherine's expression grew serious. I know they've experienced significant trauma and loss. I know Zara has taken on a parental role from a very young age. I know they've been separated once before, despite caseworkers' recommendations to keep them together. They were separated? This was news to Richard. Catherine nodded. Briefly before the third foster placement. It was a mistake that the department corrected within weeks, but the damage was done. Zara ran away twice trying to get to her sisters. Richard felt a renewed surge of protectiveness. They will never be separated again, he said firmly. No, they won't, Catherine agreed. Not if I have anything to say about it. They talked for over an hour. Catherine told him about her own adopted children, now teenagers. About her philosophy on parenting traumatized children. About her home, a spacious house with a garden where the girls could play. Richard asked dozens of questions, from the practical to the philosophical. By the end of their conversation, he felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Catherine wasn't just qualified on paper. She genuinely cared about children's well-being and understood the specific needs of his girls. There's one more thing, Richard said as their meeting drew to a close. I've set up trust funds for each of the girls, but there's a separate fund for their guardian, for you if you accept. It's not payment for taking them, it's to ensure you never have to choose between providing for them and meeting your own needs. Catherine looked surprised. That's very generous but not necessary. It is to me, Richard insisted. I want you to be able to focus on them, not on finances. After a moment, Catherine nodded. When do you plan to introduce me to them? Richard hesitated. I need to tell them about my illness first. After that, soon. Don't wait too long, Catherine advised gently. Children need time to adjust to change. The more time they have with both of us, to see that I'm not replacing you but continuing your love for them, the easier the transition will be. Richard nodded, knowing she was right. Next weekend, he decided. Would you be able to come to dinner? I'd be honored, Catherine said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand briefly. And Richard? What you're doing for these girls, it's extraordinary. Not many people would choose to become a parent knowing they had limited time. Richard smiled sadly. Perhaps that's why it was so easy for me to choose. When you know your days are numbered, it becomes very clear what matters and what doesn't. That evening, Richard arrived home to find Mrs. Reynolds waiting for him with a concerned expression. What's wrong? He asked immediately. Zara found your medication, Mrs. Reynolds said quietly. She asked me what it was for. I didn't know what to say. Richard closed his eyes briefly. Where is she now? In her room. She wouldn't come out for dinner. Richard nodded, steeling himself for the conversation he'd been avoiding. And the younger ones? Watching a movie in the living room. They don't know anything yet. Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. You can go home for the evening. I'll handle this. After Mrs. Reynolds left, Richard stood outside Zara's door, gathering his courage. Finally he knocked. Zara? May I come in? There was a long pause before a small voice answered, yes. Richard entered to find Zara sitting cross-legged on her bed, an open book in her lap that she clearly wasn't reading. Her eyes were red-rimmed but she wasn't crying now. Richard sat on the edge of her bed. Mrs. Reynolds told me you found my medication. Zara nodded, not looking at him. I looked it up online. It's for cancer pain. Richard sighed. Of course she had researched it. Zara never took anything at face value. Yes, it is. Are you dying? The question was direct, her voice steadier than it had any right to be. Yes, Richard answered, equally direct. Zara deserved the truth, not comforting lies. I have pancreatic cancer. The doctors found it too late to cure. How long? Again, the question was straightforward, practical. A few months at most. Possibly less. Zara finally looked up at him, her eyes blazing with a mixture of grief and anger. You knew when you adopted us? Richard nodded. I had just received the diagnosis that day. So it was a lie, Zara said, her voice breaking slightly. You promised you wouldn't send us back, but you're leaving anyway. No, Richard said firmly, reaching for her hand. She didn't pull away. Zara, look at me. I'm not sending you back, and I didn't adopt you knowing I would die without making provisions for your future. What does that mean? Zara asked, suspicion in her voice. It means I've arranged for someone to care for you and your sisters after I'm gone. Someone who will keep you together and love you the way you deserve to be loved. Richard squeezed her hand gently. I'm meeting with my lawyers next week to finalize everything. You'll meet your future guardian next weekend. Zara pulled her hand away then. We don't need another guardian. We need you. The simple statement, so heartfelt, nearly broke Richard. I know, he said softly. And if I could stay I would. But since I can't, I'm doing everything possible to make sure you girls are taken care of. Does Layla know? Tiana? Richard shook his head. Not yet. I wanted to tell you first. Zara nodded, understanding the implication. He was acknowledging her role, her maturity, treating her as a partner and protecting her sisters. Tiana won't understand, Zara said, wiping at her eyes. She thinks you're her dad now. I am her dad, Richard said gently. For as long as I can be. And even after I'm gone, I'll still be her dad. Just like your mother will always be your mother, even though she's gone. Zara considered this. Can I be there when you tell them? If you want to be, Richard agreed. We can tell them together tomorrow. Zara nodded, then surprised Richard by reaching out to hug him. It was the first time she had initiated physical affection. Richard held her carefully, feeling her small body shaking with suppressed sobs. It's not fair, she whispered against his shoulder. It's not fair. No, Richard agreed, his own eyes filling with tears. It's not fair at all. They sat like that for a long time, a father and daughter united in grief for a future they wouldn't share. Eventually, Zara pulled back, wiping her eyes with determination. Can we have ice cream for dinner? She asked, a touch of her usual practicality returning. Richard smiled through his own tears. Absolutely. Ice cream for dinner it is. As they left the room together, Zara reached for his hand. It was a small gesture, but to Richard, it meant everything. For the first time he truly felt like her father. Not just her guardian or provider, but someone she trusted with her heart. Tomorrow would bring more difficult conversations, more tears. But tonight they would have ice cream for dinner and watch silly movies and pretend just for a few hours that time wasn't slipping away from them. Telling Layla and Tiana about his illness was even harder than Richard had anticipated. Zara sat beside him on the couch, offering silent support as he explained in simple terms that he was very sick and that the doctors couldn't make him better. Layla understood immediately, her eyes widening with the familiar fear of loss. You're going to die like Mommy did? Not exactly like your mom, Richard said gently. I'm going to be sick for a while first. But yes, eventually I will die. Tiana, at 5, struggled to grasp the concept. But can't the doctors fix you? Doctors are supposed to make people better. Sometimes even doctors can't fix everything, Richard explained, his heart breaking at her confused expression. Remember how in Charlotte's Web, Charlotte couldn't live forever, even though she was very special? Tiana's lower lip trembled. But you just became our daddy. And I'll always be your daddy even when I can't be here with you, Richard promised. And I've found someone very special who will take care of you after I'm gone. You'll meet her next weekend. Is she nice? Tiana asked, the practical question of a child who had already experienced too many caretakers. Very nice, Richard assured her. She has 2 children of her own and a big garden where you can play. Will we have to leave our rooms? Layla asked quietly. I like my room. Not right away, Richard said truthfully. You'll stay here with Mrs. Reynolds helping out until I... He couldn't bring himself to say the words. And then you'll move to Catherine's house. That's her name, Catherine. But you'll have plenty of time to get to know her first. The girls had more questions, each processing the news in their own way. Zara remained stoic, having had her own time to absorb the shock. Layla grew quiet, retreating into herself as she often did when overwhelmed. Tiana cried, then asked if they could bake cookies, her way of seeking comfort and normalcy. In the days that followed, Richard noticed subtle changes in the girls' behavior. Tiana became more clingy, wanting to be near him constantly. Layla drew pictures, dozens of them, of their family. Richard, Zara, herself, and Tiana standing in front of their building. Sometimes she included Mrs. Reynolds. Once, she drew a figure with a question mark for a face, standing slightly apart from the others. That's Catherine, she explained when Richard asked. I don't know what she looks like yet. Zara, always the most practical, began asking detailed questions about the future. What would happen to their things? Would they still go to the same school? Could they visit their old apartment? Richard answered each question as honestly as he could, involving her in the planning process when appropriate. The weekend arrived and with it Catherine's visit. Richard had arranged for a casual dinner at home, wanting the girls to feel comfortable in their own space. Mrs. Reynolds had helped him prepare their favorite foods, and the dining room table was set with the girls' colorful placemats rather than the formal dinnerware Richard rarely used. Will she like us? Layla asked as they waited for Catherine to arrive. She'll love you, Richard assured her, though he understood her anxiety. These girls had been evaluated and judged by so many adults in their short lives. When the doorbell rang, Tiana hid behind Richard's legs while Zara stood tall beside him, prepared to assess this newcomer with her usual careful scrutiny. Layla hung back near the living room doorway, watching. Catherine arrived with a warm smile and 3 small gift bags. Hello, she greeted them all. I'm Catherine. You must be Zara, Layla, and Tiana. Your father has told me so much about you. Father. The word still gave Richard a strange thrill, even as he felt the bittersweet knowledge that he wouldn't hold the title for long. Dinner was initially awkward, with the girls answering Catherine's questions politely but reservedly. Richard had expected this and reminded himself to be patient. Trust would take time. The turning point came when Catherine mentioned her garden. I grow strawberries, she told them. Big, juicy ones that taste like candy. Much better than the ones from the store. Tiana perked up. I love strawberries. Me too, Catherine said, smiling. Maybe you could help me pick them this summer. I always need good strawberry hunters. I'm good at finding things, Tiana declared proudly. From there, the conversation flowed more easily. Catherine talked about her 2 children, teenagers now, both adopted as older children. Sam is 17. He plays guitar and basketball. Lily is 15. She loves to read and has a pet turtle named Flash. A turtle? Layla asked, interested despite herself. I like turtles. Flash would love to meet you, Catherine said. He's very friendly for a turtle. By the end of dinner, Tiana was sitting beside Catherine, showing her a drawing she'd made. Layla was asking questions about Flash the turtle and Catherine's garden. Even Zara seemed less guarded, though she still watched Catherine with careful eyes. After the girls went to bed, Richard and Catherine sat in the living room talking quietly. They're wonderful, Catherine said sincerely. You've done an amazing job with them in such a short time. They were wonderful when I found them, Richard replied. I just gave them a safe place to be themselves. Catherine nodded, understanding. That's more than many people would do, especially in your situation. She hesitated, then added, How are you feeling? Physically, I mean. Richard considered deflecting but decided on honesty. Some days are better than others. The pain is manageable for now. And emotionally? Richard smiled sadly. Terrified, grateful, angry, peaceful. Sometimes all within the same hour. That sounds about right, Catherine said with a small nod. Richard, I want you to know something. When the time comes, I won't try to replace you in their lives. You'll always be their father. I'll make sure they remember you, talk about you, keep you present in their lives. Richard felt a lump form in his throat. Thank you. That means more than I can say. They discussed practical matters then. The transition plan, the legal arrangements, the girls' routines and preferences. Catherine took notes, asking insightful questions that reassured Richard of her genuine interest in providing continuity and stability for the girls. As Catherine prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Would it be alright if I came by again next week? Perhaps we could take the girls to the park or the museum, start building some happy memories together." "I'd like that," Richard said, touched by her sensitivity and foresight. "We all would." The following weeks fell into a new rhythm. Catherine visited regularly, sometimes for dinner, sometimes for outings. The girls gradually warmed to her, though there were still moments of resistance and fear. Zara, in particular, seemed torn between accepting Catherine and staying loyal to Richard. "It's okay to like her," Richard told Zara one evening as they sat on the balcony watching the city lights. "It doesn't mean you're replacing me or forgetting me." Zara pulled her knees to her chest. "I know. It just feels weird. Like we're planning for you to be gone." "We are," Richard said gently. "Because that's the reality we're facing. But planning doesn't make it happen any faster or slower. It just means you girls will be taken care of when that day comes." Zara was quiet for a long moment. "I like her," she finally admitted. "She doesn't talk to us like we're babies or like we're broken. And she remembers things we tell her." "I like her too," Richard said, relieved to hear Zara's honest assessment. "I wouldn't have chosen her if I didn't think she would love you girls the way you deserve to be loved." As summer approached, Richard's condition worsened. He tried to hide it from the girls, but they were observant, especially Zara. They noticed when he couldn't eat much at dinner, when he needed to rest more frequently, when the pain medication made him drowsy. On a warm June afternoon, Richard sat on a bench in the park, watching as Catherine helped Tiana feed the ducks while Zara and Layla explored a nearby playground. The sun was warm on his face, and for a moment he could almost forget the constant pain, the countdown ticking in his head. Catherine joined him on the bench while the girls continued playing within sight. "Good day?" she asked. "The best," Richard replied sincerely. "Seeing them happy, it's everything." Catherine nodded. "They're remarkable children. Resilient, loving, so full of potential." "Promise me something," Richard said suddenly. "Promise me you'll tell them about today. About all our days together. When they're older and memories fade, remind them that they were loved, that we were a family, even if it was just for a little while." "I promise," Catherine said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "We'll remember you together, always." As they sat in companionable silence, watching the three sisters play, Richard knew he had made the right choice that day outside the community center. His legacy wouldn't be the fortune he'd amassed or the company he'd built. It would be these three extraordinary girls and the love they would carry forward into the world long after he was gone. In that moment, despite everything, Richard felt like the richest man alive. July brought a heat wave and a marked decline in Richard's health. He tried to maintain normalcy for the girls' sake, but there were days when getting out of bed required every ounce of his strength. Mrs. Reynolds now stayed overnight, occupying the guest room to help with the girls when Richard was too weak or in too much pain to manage. Dr. Brennan had adjusted his medication, balancing pain control with clarity of mind. Richard refused to spend his final weeks in a drugged haze, even if it meant enduring more discomfort. Every moment with the girls was too precious to lose to sedation. Catherine visited almost daily now, becoming a steady presence in their lives. The girls had visited her home twice, meeting her children and exploring the garden Tiana was so fascinated by. They'd even met Flash the turtle, who had won Layla's heart immediately. One evening, as Richard rested on the couch while the girls and Catherine prepared dinner in the kitchen, he overheard a conversation that brought tears to his eyes. "When I make cookies at my house," Catherine was saying, "I always put extra chocolate chips in. Do you think we should do that here too?" "Daddy likes them that way," Tiana said. There was a brief pause, then Catherine's gentle voice. "Then that's exactly how we'll make them. And you can teach me all of his favorite recipes so I can make them for you sometimes, to remind you of him." "He likes his pancakes with blueberries inside and on top," Layla offered. "And he always cuts them in triangles, not circles." "Triangles are better," Zara added. "They hold more syrup." The simple, ordinary conversation, children sharing their father's preferences, struck Richard with unexpected force. This was working. Catherine wasn't trying to replace him but was helping the girls preserve their memories of him, acknowledging his ongoing presence in their lives even as she prepared to take over his role. Later that night, after Catherine had gone and the girls were in bed, Richard called his lawyer. "It's time to finalize everything," he told Jacob. "I don't have much longer." "I'll bring the papers tomorrow," Jacob promised. "Is there anything else you need?" Richard thought for a moment. "Yes. I want to record video messages for the girls, for birthdays, graduations, Other milestones? Can you arrange for someone to come set that up? The next few days were spent putting final touches on Richard's plans for the girls. He recorded messages for each of them, to be given on specific birthdays and life events. He wrote letters, selected keepsakes, created memory books filled with photos of their time together. Zara found him one afternoon, sorting through photographs in his office. "What are you doing?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Making sure you girls have plenty of pictures to remember our time together," Richard explained. Zara picked up a photo of all 4 of them at the zoo, taken just weeks after the adoption. "I remember this day. Tiana was scared of the monkeys. And you pretended to be scared too so she wouldn't feel bad," Richard recalled with a smile. "I wasn't pretending," Zara protested, but she was smiling too. "Monkeys are creepy." They sat together, looking through the photos, remembering the stories behind each one. Richard was struck by how many memories they'd managed to create in such a short time. "I want you to know something," he said after a while. "Adopting you 3 was the best decision I ever made. You've given my life meaning in a way nothing else ever did." Zara leaned against his shoulder, a gesture that had become more frequent as she grew comfortable with physical affection. "Even though you knew you were sick? Even though it's been hard?" "Especially because of that," Richard said firmly. "Zara, before I met you girls I had everything money could buy, but nothing that truly mattered. You changed that. You 3 gave me a family." Zara was quiet for a moment. "We'll remember you," she promised suddenly, her voice fierce. "I'll make sure Tiana remembers even if she's little now. I'll tell her stories about you every day." Richard put his arm around her, pulling her close despite the pain it caused in his side. "I know you will. You're an extraordinary big sister, Zara. I've always admired that about you." The following week brought Tiana's 6th birthday. Despite his worsening condition, Richard was determined to make it special. Catherine helped with the preparations, transforming the penthouse into an underwater wonderland for Tiana's mermaid-themed party. The day of the party, Richard woke feeling stronger than he had in days, a small gift he was profoundly grateful for. He dressed carefully in the silly mermaid crown Tiana had insisted he wear and joined the celebration. Watching Tiana blow out her candles, surrounded by new friends from school and her sisters, Richard felt a complex mixture of joy and sorrow. He wouldn't see her 7th birthday or any that followed. But she was happy today, secure in the knowledge that she was loved, and that was enough. After the party, when most of the guests had gone and the girls were playing with Tiana's new toys, Catherine joined Richard on the balcony. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Today was a good day," Richard said. Seeing her so happy, it was worth every bit of energy. Catherine nodded. "She'll remember this birthday. They all will." Richard looked out over the city skyline. "Catherine, I need to ask you something important. When I'm gone, will you tell them the truth about me? Not just the good parts, but all of it? That I wasn't always the person they knew, that I learned to love because of them." "If that's what you want," Catherine said. "But Richard, the man those girls love, that's the real you. Whatever you were before, this is who you became. That's the truth that matters." Later that night, as Richard tucked Tiana into bed, she looked up at him with serious eyes. "Was this the best birthday ever?" she asked. "It was the best birthday I've ever been to," Richard assured her. Tiana yawned, clutching the stuffed mermaid he'd given her. "When I'm 7, can we have a unicorn party?" Richard felt his heart constrict. "You can have any kind of party you want, sweetheart. And you'll wear a unicorn horn instead of a mermaid crown," Tiana continued, her eyes drooping. "That sounds perfect," Richard whispered, kissing her forehead as she drifted to sleep. In the hallway, he found Zara waiting, her expression telling him she'd overheard the exchange. Without a word, she stepped forward and hugged him tightly. "We'll make sure her unicorn party is amazing," she said softly. "Catherine and me. We'll do it just like you would." Richard held his oldest daughter, marveling at her strength, her compassion, her ability to face reality without flinching. "I know you will," he murmured into her hair. "I know you will." August arrived with mounting heat and increasing pain. Richard's world contracted to the penthouse, then to his bedroom as his strength ebbed. Mrs. Reynolds moved in full-time, and a nurse visited daily. Catherine came every afternoon with the girls after their summer activities, bringing laughter and normalcy into the increasingly medical atmosphere. Richard insisted on no hospital, no extraordinary measures. He wanted to die at home with his daughters nearby. Dr. Brennan had arranged for hospice care, ensuring Richard's comfort without prolonging the inevitable. On a particularly difficult night, when pain kept him awake despite the medication, Richard found Layla standing in his doorway. "Can't sleep?" he asked, trying to keep his voice normal despite the pain. Layla shook her head. I had a dream about Mom again. And then I got scared about you. Richard patted the edge of his bed, and Layla climbed up carefully, mindful of the tubes and equipment now surrounding him. I'm not scared, Richard told her. And you don't need to be either. Does it hurt? Layla asked, her voice small. Sometimes, Richard admitted. But the doctors give me medicine that helps. Layla considered this. When Mom was sick, she was different. She would get angry or sad or sleep all day. But you're still you. I'm trying very hard to stay me, Richard said, touched by her observation. I want you girls to remember me as I am, not as the sickness. Layla leaned against his shoulder carefully. I won't forget. I remember everything. Richard believed her. Of the three sisters, Layla was the observer, the one who noticed details others missed. Will you do something for me, Layla? Will you write down your memories sometimes? In a journal, maybe. The things we did together, the things that made you happy or sad or angry. Will you do that? Layla nodded solemnly. I can do that. It will help, Richard said. To remember but also to understand your feelings. Writing things down always helped me. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, until Layla's eyes began to droop. Richard called for Mrs. Reynolds to take her back to bed, lacking the strength to carry her himself. As August drew to a close, Richard knew his time was growing very short. His legal affairs were in order, the transition plan for the girls was set, and Catherine was prepared to move into the penthouse temporarily after his death, to ease the girls' adjustment before eventually moving them to her home. On what would be his final lucid day, Richard asked to see each of his daughters alone. Tiana came first, climbing carefully onto his bed with her stuffed mermaid. I have something special for you, Richard told her, reaching for a small box on his nightstand. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a mermaid charm. This is for you to wear when you're a bit older. Until then, Catherine will keep it safe. Tiana touched the bracelet reverently. It's beautiful. Like you, Richard said, smiling despite his weakness. Tiana, you bring so much joy to everyone around you. Never lose that gift. Next came Layla, serious and quiet as always. Richard gave her a leather-bound journal with her name embossed on the cover. For your memories, he explained. And your thoughts, your dreams, anything you want to preserve. Layla ran her fingers over the cover. I'll write in it every day, she promised. And I'll be listening, Richard told her. Just because you can't see me doesn't mean I won't be there. Finally, Zara came in, her face composed but her eyes revealing her grief. Richard handed her a small velvet pouch. What is it? She asked, opening it to find a simple silver key on a chain. It's the key to a safe deposit box, Richard explained. When you turn 18, Catherine will take you there. Inside are letters I've written for each of you and some other things I want you to have when you're older. Zara put the chain around her neck, tucking the key under her shirt. I'll keep it safe until then. I know you will, Richard said. Zara, I want you to know how proud I am of you. But I also want you to remember that you're allowed to be a child, to make mistakes, to need help sometimes. Catherine is there for all of you. Let her be the adult now. Zara nodded, tears filling her eyes. I'll try. That evening, Richard asked Catherine to bring all three girls to his room. Though weak, he wanted to see them together one last time while he was still fully present. They gathered around his bed, Tiana curled against his side, Layla holding his hand, and Zara standing protectively near the head of the bed. I want to tell you a story, Richard said, his voice soft but clear. About a man who thought he had everything, until he realized he had nothing that truly mattered. And about three amazing girls who taught him what family really means. As Richard told their story, from that first meeting outside the community center to their current life together, the girls listened intently, occasionally adding details he missed or correcting his timeline with gentle smiles. The man in the story thought he was rescuing three girls, Richard concluded. But the truth was they rescued him. They gave his life meaning and joy when he needed it most. That's us, Tiana whispered. We're the girls in the story. Yes, you are, Richard confirmed, smiling at her. And I want you to remember that no matter what happens, our story doesn't end. It just changes. Because love doesn't disappear when people leave. It stays in your heart always. As the girls said goodnight, each hugging him carefully, Richard felt a profound peace settle over him. He had done everything he could to prepare them, to ensure their future. The rest was in Catherine's hands, and in the strength he knew these remarkable sisters possessed. 3 days later, Richard Coleman, billionaire and father, passed away peacefully in his sleep, just over 4 months after receiving his diagnosis. The day of Richard's funeral dawned clear and bright, a beautiful late summer morning that seemed at odds with the somber occasion. Catherine helped the girls dress in the outfits they had chosen, not traditional black, but colorful clothes that reminded them of happy times with Richard. Tiana wore a dress with mermaids in memory of her birthday party. Layla chose a sweater Richard had complimented once, saying the blue matched her thoughtful eyes. Zara wore the bracelet Richard had given her for her 11th birthday just weeks before, a delicate silver chain with a protective angel charm. The funeral was private, attended only by close associates, the household staff who had come to care deeply for the family, and of course the girls and Catherine. Richard had left explicit instructions. No business talk, no lengthy eulogies about his professional accomplishments, just a simple celebration of the family he had formed in his final months. At Catherine's suggestion, each girl placed something special in Richard's casket. A drawing from Tiana, a poem Layla had written in her new journal, and from Zara, a family photo she had carried in her pocket every day since Richard first became ill. People who had known Richard for decades were surprised by the emotional ceremony, by the genuine grief of these three children who had only known him for such a short time. Many whispered about the strange circumstances, the dying billionaire who adopted 3 foster children. But those who observed carefully saw not a publicity stunt or a charitable gesture, but a real family saying goodbye to their father. After the funeral, life changed quickly. Catherine moved into the penthouse as planned, sharing Richard's master bedroom suite with Tiana, who had become increasingly clingy since his death. Layla and Zara kept to their own rooms, though Zara often ended up in Layla's bed in the middle of the night, both sisters finding comfort in each other's presence. Mrs. Reynolds stayed on, providing continuity and practical support as Catherine navigated the complexities of caring for 3 grieving children. Richard's staff maintained the household, fulfilling his wish that the girls' environment remain stable for as long as they needed. School started in September, offering a welcome routine and distraction. The girls' teachers had been informed of their loss and provided extra support and understanding as they adjusted. Tiana's kindergarten teacher sent daily notes home to Catherine, reporting small victories, a smile during story time, participation in a game, a full lunch eaten. Layla channeled her grief into her new journal, writing letters to Richard that she sometimes shared with Catherine and sometimes kept private. Her therapist encouraged this outlet, praising her emotional awareness and ability to articulate her feelings. Zara, always the protector, threw herself into caring for her sisters, sometimes to her own detriment. Catherine gently reminded her of Richard's last request, to let herself be a child, to allow others to shoulder some of the adult responsibilities. "He made me promise to look after you all," Catherine told Zara one evening as they sat on the balcony where Zara had shared so many talks with Richard. Not the other way around. Zara fingered the key she wore around her neck. "I miss him," she said simply. "I know," Catherine replied. "We all do. Some of the kids at school said it was weird that I miss him so much when he was only my dad for a few months," Zara confided. "They don't understand. Time doesn't measure love," Catherine said. "What you and your sisters shared with Richard was real and special, no matter how brief." In October, 6 weeks after Richard's death, Catherine broached the subject of moving to her house. "Not right away," she assured the girls. "But maybe we could start spending weekends there to get used to it." This penthouse was Richard's home. "My house could be our home together." The girls had mixed reactions. Tiana was excited about the garden and the prospect of a room decorated just for her. Layla was hesitant but willing to try, especially after Catherine suggested they could bring some of their favorite things from the penthouse to make their new rooms feel familiar. Zara was the most resistant. "This is where we lived with Richard," she argued. "If we move, it's like we're leaving him behind." "We could never leave Richard behind," Catherine said gently. "He's part of us now, part of our family story. We'll take him with us wherever we go." She showed Zara the memory wall she had started at her house. Photographs of Richard with the girls, artwork they had created together, even the silly mermaid crown from Tiana's birthday prominently displayed. "Your father made sure you would always stay together, always be taken care of," Catherine reminded her. "He also wanted you to grow and thrive and create new happy memories. Moving forward doesn't mean forgetting him." Slowly, Zara began to accept the idea of the transition. By Thanksgiving, the family was splitting time between the penthouse and Catherine's house. By Christmas, they were living primarily at Catherine's, with occasional weekend visits to the penthouse that grew less frequent as they settled into their new home. The move was made easier by Catherine's thoughtful integration of elements from their life with Richard. Furniture from their bedrooms, artwork from the penthouse walls, the kitchen table where they had shared so many meals together. As the first anniversary of Richard's death approached the following summer, Catherine suggested a special commemoration. "I thought we might plant a tree for Richard in the garden," she proposed. "Something that will grow and flourish just like the three of you." The girls embraced the idea enthusiastically. They chose a cherry tree, remembering how Richard had once mentioned that cherry blossoms were his favorite flower. On the anniversary day, they planted the tree together, each girl adding a scoop of soil around its roots. "In Japan, cherry blossoms represent the beauty and fragility of life," Catherine explained as they worked. "They remind us that life is precious because it doesn't last forever." "Like Daddy," Tiana said, now 7 and increasingly able to talk about Richard without tears. "Exactly like Daddy," Catherine agreed. "Beautiful, precious, and always remembered." That night, Catherine brought out a special box. "Richard left this with me," she told the girls. "Inside are videos he made for each of you to be watched on special occasions. There's one marked first anniversary that we can watch together if you'd like." Gathered in the living room, the three sisters and Catherine watched as Richard's face appeared on the screen, recorded the summer before when his illness was advanced but before he became bedridden. "Hello, my darlings," Richard said, his smile tired but genuine. "If you're watching this, it means a year has passed since I left you. I hope it's been a year of healing, of adjusting to your new life with Catherine, of growing and learning and being the extraordinary girls I know you are." He spoke to each of them directly, mentioning specific hopes he had for them: that Tiana would continue dancing, which she had started shortly before his death, that Layla would keep writing in her journal, that Zara would allow herself to enjoy being 11, now 12, without carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. "I want you to know that adopting you was the best decision I ever made," Richard continued, his eyes bright with emotion. "People laughed when they heard what I had done, a dying billionaire adopting 3 girls he barely knew. They thought it was foolish or self-serving. But they didn't understand what I discovered, that family isn't about blood or time or obligation. It's about love, pure and simple." He paused, gathering himself. "My greatest regret is that I won't see you grow up. I won't be there for your graduations or first dates or weddings. But please know that I will be watching over you, proud of every step you take, every challenge you overcome, every joy you embrace." By the end of the video, all 4 were crying, not just tears of sadness but of gratitude for the man who had changed their lives so completely in such a short time. As the screen went dark, Zara spoke up. "He saved us," she said quietly. "Not just from foster care but from being separated, from growing up without knowing what it feels like to have a real dad. And we saved him too," Layla added thoughtfully. "He was all alone before us. Now we're not alone, and he's not alone in heaven," Tiana concluded with the simple wisdom of a child. "So everybody got saved." Catherine looked at the 3 sisters, Zara with her protective strength, Layla with her quiet perceptiveness, Tiana with her boundless joy, and marveled at the family they had become. A family born of loss and grief, certainly, but also of tremendous love and intentional connection. Richard had given these girls more than his fortune, more than security and education and material comfort. He had given them the knowledge that they were worthy of love, that they deserved to be chosen, that they belonged together. And in his final months, facing his own mortality, he had discovered what truly mattered, not the wealth he had accumulated or the business empire he had built, but the lives he had touched and the love he had both given and received. 5 years later, Zara Coleman, now 17, stood at the entrance to her high school's auditorium, nervously adjusting the note cards in her hand. As class valedictorian, she was expected to deliver a speech that would inspire her fellow graduates. She had been working on it for weeks, wanting to get every word just right. "You're going to be amazing," Layla assured her, straightening Zara's graduation cap. At 15, Layla had grown into a thoughtful, creative teenager who still carried the journal Richard had given her, now filled with poems and stories that had won her school's writing awards. "What if I forget everything?" Zara fretted. "Then I'll shout it to you from the audience," Tiana declared confidently. At 11, she remained the family optimist, bringing light and laughter wherever she went. Catherine joined them, camera in hand. "Richard would be so proud of you today," she said, embracing Zara. "Of all of you." Over the years, Catherine had kept her promise to keep Richard's memory alive in their family. His photograph held a place of honor in their home, his birthday was celebrated each year, and his videos were watched on the special occasions he had designated: graduations, Sweet 16, important milestones. The cherry tree they had planted on the first anniversary of his death now bloomed magnificently each spring, a living reminder of his brief but profound presence in their lives. "I can't believe it's been 5 years," Zara said softly. In some ways it feels like yesterday, Catherine agreed. In others like a lifetime ago. As they took their seats in the auditorium, Zara made her way to the stage with the other honored graduates. When her name was called, she approached the podium, took a deep breath, and began to speak. 5 years ago, my life changed completely when a man I didn't know stopped his car and spoke to me and my sisters as we waited outside a community center. Zara began, her voice gaining strength as she continued. People laughed when they heard that a billionaire with only 4 months to live had adopted 3 black girls from the foster care system. They thought it was a publicity stunt, a tax write-off, or a bizarre midlife crisis. The audience was silent, captivated by her unusual opening. What they didn't understand was that Richard Coleman saw something in us that day, not charity cases, not a good deed to balance his karmic books before dying, but 3 sisters who deserved to stay together, who deserved a chance at a different kind of life. Zara looked out at the audience, finding Layla, Tiana, and Catherine easily. In the brief time we had together, my father taught me the most important lesson of my life, that true wealth has nothing to do with money. True wealth is found in the connections we make, the love we give and receive, the difference we make in each other's lives. She continued, sharing how Richard's choice had transformed not just her future but her understanding of what family meant, of what was possible when someone chose love over fear, generosity over self-protection. As we graduate today and move into the next chapter of our lives, I challenge each of us to consider how we might use whatever privileges and resources we have, whether that's money, education, connections, or simply our time and attention, to make a meaningful difference for someone else. Not as charity, but as recognition of our shared humanity and the unexpected joy that comes from genuine connection. Zara concluded her speech by announcing the Richard Coleman Memorial Scholarship she had established using a portion of her trust fund. A scholarship specifically designed for siblings in foster care who wanted to attend college together. My father's legacy isn't the company he built or the wealth he accumulated, she said, her voice steady and clear. His legacy is the love that transformed 4 strangers into a family in just 4 short months. A love that continues to grow and ripple outward, touching lives far beyond what he could have imagined on that summer day when he first saw 3 sisters sitting on a step, waiting for someone to notice them. As applause filled the auditorium, Zara looked up for a moment, imagining Richard watching from somewhere, hoping he was proud of the young woman she had become. The key he had given her still hung around her neck, a constant reminder of both what she had lost and what she had gained. After the ceremony, as the family celebrated at Zara's favorite restaurant, Catherine presented her with a small wrapped package. "This is from Richard," she explained. "He left it for your graduation day." Inside, Zara found a beautiful leather portfolio embossed with her initials and a note in Richard's handwriting. "Zara, my remarkable daughter, today marks the beginning of your independent journey into adulthood. I wish more than anything that I could be there to see you in your cap and gown, to embarrass you with too many photographs, to tell you in person how immensely proud I am of you. From the first moment I saw you sitting on those steps, fierce and protective of your sisters, I knew you were extraordinary. You taught me more about strength, resilience, and love in our short time together than I had learned in all my years before. Remember that your value has never been defined by your circumstances or others' perceptions. You are a force of nature, Zara Coleman, capable of changing lives just as you changed mine. Whatever path you choose, walk it with the same courage and integrity you've always shown. Know that I am watching over you, celebrating every triumph, supporting you through every challenge. All my love, always, your dad." Tears filled Zara's eyes as she read the letter, then handed it to Catherine and her sisters to read. Richard had written similar letters for each significant milestone in their lives, entrusting them to Catherine to deliver at the appropriate times. It was one of the many ways he had ensured his presence would remain in their lives long after he was gone. That evening, the sisters gathered in the garden, sitting beneath the cherry tree as the setting sun cast a golden glow over everything. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Richard hadn't stopped that day?" Layla asked. Zara considered the question. "Sometimes. We probably would have been separated eventually. The system was already trying to split us up." "I might not remember you guys," Tiana said soberly. "I was so little then." "But he did stop," Catherine reminded them, joining them with a tray of lemonade. "And everything changed." Zara fingered the key around her neck, thinking about the safe deposit box waiting for her. She was 18 now, old enough to access it, but somehow not quite ready yet. It represented a final connection to Richard, a last message he had prepared, and part of her wanted to save it a little longer. "People still laugh sometimes when I tell them our story," Tiana said. "They think it's like a movie or something made up." "Let them laugh," Zara said, putting an arm around her youngest sister. They just don't understand. Understand what? Layla asked. Zara looked at her family, her sisters who had journeyed with her through loss and love, Catherine who had kept her promise to a dying man and become a true mother to them all, and smiled. That sometimes the most beautiful stories are the ones that seem most unlikely, she said. A billionaire with only 4 months to live. 3 sisters who needed a home. Strangers who became family. A love that lasted far beyond those 4 months. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the Coleman sisters sat together under their father's tree, surrounded by the legacy of love he had left them, not measured in dollars or days, but in the unbreakable bonds they shared and the lives they would touch as they carried his example forward. Richard Coleman's fortune had made him a successful man, but it was his decision to adopt 3 sisters no one else wanted that had made him truly rich. And in the end, that was the inheritance that mattered most, the inheritance of hope.